Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Many of the people that I work with tell me that they don't know how to show up authentically, that they haven't had the experience of being in safe environments with people that understand and can honor the trait of being highly sensitive. If this is true for you, or if you have it and you want more, you might think about taking the next online HSP course. It's a 10-week course. We meet weekly for an hour and 20 minutes. The topics that we cover are mindfulness and self-compassion, identifying negative messages and turning them into your strengths, perfectionism, embracing your emotions, self-care is non-negotiable, boundaries, communication, authenticity, and vulnerability, creating a lifestyle that honors the HSP, and expectations and disappointments. Jen Perry and I created a video for each week's module. There's a weekly email that has a link to the video. Sometimes there are other resources if you want to learn a little bit more. There are questions for reflection. You can do the homework. You can not do the homework. What I've heard from people is it can be so affirming to be in a group of people that get you. And I have a client right now who's taking the current group, and she says it's just fascinating. She has never been around other HSPs before, and she's only been around people that told her she was too sensitive or making a big deal out of things. She's learning language about how to communicate about her feelings, and I love watching her process unfold because she often talks to me when we meet for our individual session. Nobody in the group knows it. She's a client. I don't share that information. But I just love watching her awe as she learns more about the trait and sees how it shows up in other people. Registration is going to start March 30th and go through April 13th. There's an early bird registration. If you're interested in learning more about the course, you can go to unapologeticallysensitive.com. There's an HSP groups tab. I've done interviews with a number of people that have taken the course. There's a video there. There are little short clips. If you have any questions, you're welcome to reach out to me. These groups have been transformational, and many of the groups have continued to meet after the 10 weeks. I can't guarantee that you will meet lifelong friends there, but it certainly is a possibility. If you're interested, I'd love to have you. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. I'm really glad you're here today. This episode with Jen Perry, I think you'll find really helpful, especially if you've been hustling, pushing, feeling responsible, overfunctioning, just doing everything you can to get things done. And if you're having those feelings of not enough, feeling inadequate, that there's so much to do, we really talk about how we can slow down and get grounded in ourselves, and how we can kind of, what Jen calls is bringing your B game. I talk about lowering the bar, having things be good enough. I think you're really going to enjoy this episode. It was spontaneous. We had an idea of what we were going to talk about. And then as Jen was talking, I thought, this is really what we need to talk about. So I hope you enjoy it. And now, on to the show. Hey, Jen, welcome.
Hi, Patricia.
How are you today?
How am I today?
You can tell the truth.
I am scattered, pulled in a million directions, a little worried, happy to be here with you.
You have a lot going on.
Beautiful day out. Yeah, there's a lot going on.
Yeah.
Most days.
Yeah, it's 12:38. We were going to record at 12 and you just had stuff going on, which is totally fine. So we paused.
I thank you for holding that space for me. I know it was, it's amazing to be able to come on. I've got like 4 things all going off at the same time, but I wanted you to be with me. I was just like, Can you just hang in here with me for a minute instead of, which is really cool for me because I think my tendency in the past would have probably been to just like hole up, be frustrated, hate sort of publicly, not publicly, but, with you and now publicly I'm talking about it, right? Like
Yeah.
being scattered in a million directions, but it's real and resting in some more security in my life. And I'm not trading that realness anymore, right? So I'm enjoying it, actually.
Yeah.
Being able to show up just as I am and you lovingly holding space for me. I really appreciate you for that today.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're going to change gears. We're not going to talk about what we thought we were going to talk about, because as you were talking, I want to switch gears, but let me respond to what you said. I think it's so important for us to make room for the human, for the need. It would have been really easy, and had this happened a while ago. In fact, I'm just going to pause for a second. Take a deep breath. So I'm getting grounded in myself. And this is something that you and I have been talking about. And this relates to what we started out with. It's so easy for us to get frantic, to push, to overfunction, to get into that sense of high responsibility. And if you listen to my voice, it dropped back down. My cadence is slower. And this is something that, Jen, you've been helping me out with personally recently. And I see you closing your eyes and taking some deep breaths. I was listening to earlier podcast episodes way in the beginning, and my voice, it's softer, it's slower, it's more melodic. And if you listen to more recent episodes, my voice is higher, it's up here, the cadence is faster. I have really been working with you, Jen, about learning how to get grounded in myself, and that part of me that can push through things and get stuff done is hypervigilant and very productive, not very empathic. And I want everybody right now, just let's take a deep breath. Deep breath into the nose. Hold, exhale through the mouth. And let's do it again. And when you exhale, I want your shoulders to drop down a little bit. There's any tension in your face, maybe just take a big stretch right now, whatever your body's calling for, assuming you're in a place where you can do that. We're going to take another inhale through the nose, hold, and exhale through the mouth. Just look around the room right now. What do you see? If your arms and legs are crossed, can you uncross them for a minute? Do you smell anything? What's the temperature like? What do you hear? Fans, appliances running, traffic, animals, children, clocks ticking. I think especially right now with everything that's going on in the world, it's really important for us to connect to ourselves. I was talking with a friend recently who talked about feeling untethered. When we can ground in and settle with ourselves and get grounded with ourselves, I think it just creates this really big shift. So, Jen, I'm going to let you talk if you want to. And are you okay that we switch gears for today?
I've gotten good at switching gears. Yeah, it's fine. It's real. Thank you for that break. We talk a lot about honoring whatever is coming up for us emotionally as a way of, I'm thinking back to the podcast we did about social anxiety, right? And just honoring whatever emotion comes up. If we don't attach a story to it and don't try to smash it back down, it just kind of comes up, moves around a bit, and then, kind of like a wave subsides. And it kind of feels like that. If I was showing up today with all of these different things going on, I just finished with a client who really needed a lot of time through the whole session and then even a few extra minutes. During that time, got a call from my son's school, got an email from my son's school, got a call, I think, from my sister in there too. And of course, I can't answer these yet. Composing an email to my son's school, knowing I was meeting you and texting, making sure you knew that I was going to be late, but that I was coming, right? Because you matter to me. And then just being able to show up and be like, hey, I don't even think I told you what was going on at first. It was so much and so fast it was happening that But that trust, right? That rest and like self-trust and trust between us, that was okay. Instead of something I felt like I had to go run away from and hide from until I had my SHI team were together, right? I could really rest in there. And unless we're willing to take the risk of that, which I really never was, you don't get to see how beneficial that can be.
Yeah.
And again, you can't do it with everybody, right? And we don't need everybody. Like in all the studies on resilience, it's just one other person that you need. And if you've got two in your corner, you're really lucky.
Yeah. And I asked you, how can I support you? Do you need my full attention? Can I multitask? What are you needing? And that really worked. And I was reflecting to probably about 3 years ago, maybe in another month or two, was the first time that you and I had our first Zoom call together. And we were talking about maybe creating the online HSP course. And you had shown up late. And I had this talk with you about, people arriving on time is really important to me. And I was wondering if it would work for me to work with you. And you were able to hear me so beautifully. I talk about this with clients. So the communication, the content was about you showing up on time. But what this really was about, the need underneath. Do I matter? Am I important? Do you care enough about me? But because I never knew that that's what it was, and you brought that to my attention and you addressed what was underneath it, I realized it really wasn't about people showing up on time. And that is where the trust in our relationship started to build. And so today when you're like, hey, I'm running late, it's like, no problem. It's all good. You can talk about a full circle moment, and that's really about the healing and trust that we have in our relationship.
Thank you so much for circling back to that. Yeah, I remember that moment. This was the first time we had ever talked. So I didn't know. What I did know was that it was highly unlikely I was going to be able to almost ever be on time. It's just kind of the way I roll. I don't like it about myself, really, but it's one of those things I've had to accept about myself. I've gotten a lot better through the years, but yeah, I think some of that comes from, actually all of that may come from Marshall Rosenberg's work on nonviolent communication, right? That like, what's the underlying human need? And if we can figure that out and speak to that, this sort of what appears to be a need, but it's really, like a desire or a preference, like what it really means. I remember that conversation. It was beautiful. And thank God, right? My trope of having a very hard time disappointing people.
Which we didn't even know about until recently.
Right. Yeah.
It's been there, but that was something that you and I kind of discovered together.
Yes. You pointed that out.
One of my core wounds is too much.
Yeah.
And yours is a fear of disappointing people.
Yeah.
So for those of you that are listening, my wounding created a lot of rigidity and rules because as a child, my needs weren't met. I didn't feel like I was seen or heard or that I mattered. And the way that I learned to organize was by a lot of rules and rigidity. I'm a good person. I show up on time. I'm prepared. I do what I'm supposed to do. And then the belief was that other people should meet me in that place of perfectionism. I wouldn't have called it perfectionism. And if they didn't, then I was hurt and injured because really I felt superior because this is the rule. And so many HSPs, we've looked to the outside for the rules because our inner experiences, deep feelings, those hurts, those wounds, that really feeling seen and heard for our depth, our feelings, we didn't get that. And so we don't know how to ask people for that. Do I matter? Am I important? Are my needs important? So we organize around rules, showing up on time, being prepared, being organized. We hold ourselves and other people to impossible standards, and then we get really upset when people don't meet those needs. And it's generally not about that.
Yeah, thinking about my own trope about not wanting to disappoint others. I can thread it through a lot of different childhood things, but the one that's coming to mind today, and the one that I find a lot of HSPs maybe experience or struggle with, growing up with a pretty conservative stripe of religion. Being an HSP means we take in more information, we process it more deeply. So in a non-HSP world, some of those, whether they're religiosity, like those types of teachings, and that fear, like I remember fearing for my soul if I was going to disappoint someone, God or
Mm-hmm.
or anybody for that matter, and how scary that felt, right?
Mm.
Right. It was all the attachment stuff, but then also this other kind of edge. A story
Sure.
I sometimes used to talk about it that's a little bit easier for me because it involves driver's ed in high school instead of my religious upbringing.
Mm-hmm.
So, driver's ed, and like most of the world, right, is built for non-HSPs. And I remember my driver's ed teacher standing there with a VHS tape, right? I'm dating myself.
Well, driver said you're dating yourself when it used to be free in school and you didn't have to pay for it.
Oh, it's not that way anymore, huh?
No.
My kids are almost there. I guess I was going to find that out in a couple of years.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I remember my teacher standing there and being like, you're about to see a blonde turn into a redhead. They show us this like horrific video, right? And like the HSP kids like hiding under the desk, right? That was me.
Yeah.
And the rest, non-HSP kids don't take it in as deep. They're like, oh, okay, got the message, check. Whereas HSPs tend to take in that information really deeply. And, then we make associations. So we see it everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
And so my fear of disappointing people. And, if you want to be close to someone, you have to be willing to understand this about yourself and understand this about each other.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was thinking this morning, I paddled. We saw 2 dolphins out in the ocean. It was amazing. And when we came back, I normally don't load my car near where we sit in the parking lot for coffee. And when I bought my kayak, the guy that I bought it from encouraged me to secure the bow and the stern of the boat in addition to the 2 straps that go around the middle of the boat. And so I do that. And it was funny that these 2 very seasoned kayakers were joking that my car was like the Star of India, how well secured it is. And because I never carried anything on my car, I never had a roof rack, my fear when I first got it was the kayak is going to slide off the back, it's going to kill somebody and then kill people behind it. And if that happened, I don't think I could live with myself. So this morning when they were joking because they saw how secure my boat is, I didn't say anything, but I thought, I'm okay with this because if it were to slide off and kill somebody, I don't think I could live with that. You don't get that? And if you want to laugh because I've got extra straps on my boat, I'm okay with that, which is what you're addressing. And what do we need to do to honor ourselves? And I know that if that were to happen, it would devastate me and it would ruin kayaking.
Yeah.
So laugh at, I mean, they weren't mocking me, but they were having fun.
Right.
And it probably is overkill. And you know what? I'm okay with that.
I love that self-acceptance and self-trust and knowing yourself.
Yeah. And I think that there's a time when I probably would have had to say something. I would have gotten defensive. I would have explained why I do it. And it's like, yeah, that gives me peace of mind.
It's making me think of a quote I read. I think it was just yesterday. I texted it to Christine. It was from Jeff Brown, whose writing I like a lot. And maybe I'll read this quote to you. It says, love can happen in a split second. Bondedness can't. That's the thing we learn the hard way. That love is not the end of the story. It's just the first chapter. The next chapters demand that we acknowledge our wounding, clear our emotional debris, strengthen our capacity for attachment, learn how to authentically relate, mature in the deep within. When he says that, I think of the shadow, right? Shadow stuff too. And then he goes on to say, chapter after chapter of refining our ability to meet love with a true heart. This is the work of a lifetime, our opus of opening. How terrifying, how delightful.
I love that. I'm looking at time and I know you have a client. So how are you with time right now?
I'm going to open up Zoom because, it's funny. This threads through how I meet my clients too. Right? I may have a client.
Mm-hmm.
I might not. and it's funny because I see a lot of clients with chronic pain, chronic illness. And some of them are really surprised. And, they always feel bad canceling or asking for accommodation. And yet, to me, it's like an accessibility issue.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to make ourselves accessible, we can't be charging late fees. I mean, you can, and I respect any other therapist's decision on how they decide to run their practice. So I don't mean to say that, but my choice, so let me just own it for myself, right, is that I see it as an accessibility issue and I never charge. And so I don't know. I don't know if I have a 4 o'clock or not. I might. She really, really wasn't sure. And yeah, if I can hang in that truth, you and I may have a few extra minutes.
Okay. And if all of a sudden you disappear, then
no, I'd be able to say goodbye first. But or I could just say no. I got to go at that time just to make sure. I don't know. I think I'm okay with being a weirdo that's like uber flexible.
But I think that's beautiful, and that is allowing your client to show up the way that they need to show up or not show up. Because I know it's a challenge for people that have chronic illness, that they don't know if they're going to feel well enough to show up. And I sometimes see in therapist threads, it's telehealth, so how come they can't show up? But I have a client who has chronic migraines, and often they show up in the dark room with glasses and for a very short session because they're not feeling well.
Yeah, I mean it when I talk about self-care. Usually the first time I meet with someone, I say, self-care rules the day when you're with me. I really want you to be taking care of yourself. There were certainly times in my work, my career, where I had an hour-long commute and I couldn't, my life was structured such that business-wise, that wasn't going to be feasible. And then maybe I just wouldn't take those clients. I'd refer them to someone who had more flexibility. And right now I'm thankful that I can be that flexible. I probably couldn't be that flexible with all the spots on my caseload. So, it's a balance, right? It's a balance. And like I said, I want to dial back. Like I do respect, other therapists' decisions that they have to make in their practice. We're just open and upfront about it, right?
Yeah. Kind of nice to just slow down. I think it's so easy to get caught up in that rapid go, go, go pace. And knowing that we can slow down and trust. I was just talking with a client yesterday who had this realization that being mean to herself does not help her get things done. And I think for so many of us, we think that we have to be mean and push ourselves. And if we don't push ourselves, then we're not going to get things accomplished and we're just going to be lazy. And there's so much to that self-trust that you and I are talking about and allowing yourself to rest when you need to. I'll tell you with the podcast, I used to have a regular recording schedule and everything was bing, bang, boom. And with all the things that are going on these days, it just don't. And you and I have set times to record, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I've just trusted like it'll work out. And maybe there'll be a week where there's not an episode because it just doesn't work out, and letting that be okay, as opposed to I have this commitment and I have to get an episode out and people are counting on it. And it's not that I don't care, but it's that I need to honor and listen to my own rhythms. And when I do that, then I do have creativity, and I wake up one day and I have something I want to talk about. So where is it that you're pushing and not listening? And what are your fears about what would happen? And is there a small area where you can just try and get curious and see if you let go? Does everything fall to the ground, or does that natural resting allow you to do what you need to do? I mean, what's your experience, Jen?
That resting, that self-trust, sometimes I'll talk with clients about bringing their B game instead of their A game, right? And that their B game may actually be better.
Yeah.
I think about when I was in school, you never know if you've studied enough, right? And there's always more studying you can do, where a lot of the time, and so let's say that's your A game, right? You just like study your brains out until you go take the test, which means you've not slept and probably not eaten and not taken care of yourself, right? Whereas your B game, you study what you can do, and you take that deep breath and you rest and you trust yourself and you sleep and you take care of yourself, It's like that idea that doing your best doesn't mean pushing yourself past the point of exhaustion. So your B game, I guess that's the invitation, right? That showing up, whether that's like an energy thing or not overperforming thing, or just letting yourself be messy and imperfect, like give it a try. I love that saying that, the more deeply you can show up authentically, that it gives everybody else permission to be themselves too.
Absolutely. We talk about good enough parenting. 30% is good enough parenting. So can you show up good enough?
I love that.
Yeah.
30% of the time. I remember when someone told me that I was in an infant massage class with my daughter when she was an infant. And I challenged, the facilitator was a friend of mine. And I was like, don't you mean 70% of the time? That's not possible.
Yeah. Jen, I'm looking at time and we gotta wrap this up. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for showing up exactly as you are.
Thank you.
It created a beautiful opportunity for us to just slow down today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you for holding space for me just as I am.
It's easy to do. All right. Have a great day, Jen.
Okay, you too, dear. Bye.
Bye. Hey again. I'm curious to know if that resonated for you. Do you find that you have a hard time shifting gears, or you make priorities over things and you have a hard time slowing down and resting? How was it to just take a couple of deep breaths and just get grounded? Been thinking about maybe doing some meditations. I don't know. If you're interested in that, shoot me an email at unapologeticallysensitive@gmail.com and I'll consider that. If any of what you heard makes sense, or you're struggling and you want to meet with either Jen or me, you can reach out to Jen at heartfulnessconsulting.com. You can reach out to me at unapologeticallysensitive.com. Relationships, boundaries, parenting, slowing down, learning how to take care of ourselves, perfectionism, how to honor your HS traits, all of this stuff. Jen and I can both help you with them. My hope is that you're doing well. It's a crazy time in the world right now. I have no words. Just sending peace and love and comfort and good vibes to you and those around you. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's our superpower. Have a blessed day.